Hello, and welcome to the Quietly Visible podcast. This is the podcast for introverted women who want to thrive as leaders and in life. And also those of you who want to lead as your authentic selves, who don't want to put on the pretense, you just want to be your authentic selves and lead from a place of authenticity. Now, today's topic is a very interesting topic, and it's one that I've not covered on the podcast before, so I'm really excited to introduce my guest to you. And we're going to be talking about the topic of fear-based leadership. And so my guest is Kate Lowry, and she is a CEO, coach, venture capitalist, and author of that is based in Silicon Valley, and she's an expert in fear-based leaders. And she developed her methodology growing up in a personal hierarchical family, then refined her approach in the elite worlds of startups, private equity, management consulting, and big tech at McKinsey, Meta, and Insight Partners. And she's the author of Unbreakable, How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders. And this is a topic, like I said, that I'm looking forward to unpacking. So hello, Kate, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
And before we dive in, just tell us a little bit about who is Kate?
Definitely. I started my first company about 17 years ago in the music space, then started companies in retail and machine learning before working at McKinsey as a management consultant, which was kind of a crazy business boot camp. And that's where I learned how really lonely a lot of leaders are. I did a lot of work for McKinsey in their venture capital wing called McKinsey New Ventures. And that really validated to me. I wanted to go back into the startup space. So I joined an AI startup as chief of staff. And that's where I really internalized how much founders profoundly influence culture. When they get it right, it's really right. When they get it wrong, it's really bad. In my time as a chief of staff, I noticed I was most interested in the people and product functions. So I started my training as an executive coach and joined Meta in product strategy. And that's where I really learned to treat everything, including myself, as a product to be iterated. But I missed working one-on-one with startup founders, so moved back into venture capital. In venture capital, I've advised, hundreds of startup CEOs, and coached them. But I found that working inside a venture capital firm advising startups was a little bit of a conflict of interest. The startup founders are so afraid that you're going to tell their board member and get them fired that it's hard for them to open up. So I branched out on my own and created my own coaching and advising practice focused on mission-driven and underrepresented founders. And I work with them every day, helping them break into Silicon Valley. But it was around February of this year that I noticed that my founders were starting to really struggle with a wave of new leadership. Leadership styles go in and out of vogue, just like anything else. And it was probably this winter that it became very clear we were in a new gloves off era of kind of hierarchical, cruel, top-down leadership. And most of my clients and peers didn't have the same skills I had, so I set out to write this book.
Brilliant. Okay. And I remember, over the years that I've had experiences of leaders who were quite fearful. And something that really stands out for me is my very first job that I had, and the leader was quite a frightening person.
Hmm.
So if you imagine someone who's just entered the world of work, and so you feel quite vulnerable anyway. And he was very controlling, listening to how I'm answering the phone, and would shout if I got something wrong. I'd shout at me, and he used to put fear in me because I'd be so scared to get something wrong. Yeah. So, have you experienced that yourself? That's fear-based leadership.
Yeah, definitely. So fear-based leaders can show up anywhere there's a power dynamic that can be taken advantage of. They're in community organizations and businesses and in families. And so in my case, I grew up in a fear-based family. Both of my parents led the family as fear-based leaders. And then in business, I've had 8 fear-based bosses.
Wow.
So I've really, really seen the gamut of this type of person. And you're right, they totally create this feeling of, ooh, I have to walk on eggshells, like can never say or do anything right. But what a lot of people don't realize is that leaders like this bluster a lot. They posture to be big and scary, but they're actually really deeply unoriginal and highly predictable. And so if you learn how they think and how they make choices, you can use skill sets to kind of run circles around them.
Mm. So before we unpack some of that, what was it like for you, your experience? And you said you've had eight, so that is quite a lot to have in a career, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And this is really common right now. So if you feel like you're just in a really difficult situation, know that a lot of people are feeling that way. You know, my peers, even just meeting up for coffee in Silicon Valley, are almost all saying, I have a difficult boss, I have a toxic boss, I have a top-down boss. They want everything from me, or they don't give anything back. They're extractive. I don't like this. And it's created this sensation for workers that they're kind of jumping from the frying pan into the fire. And well, I would say not all of the bosses in my career have been like this. Certainly not. In fact, the ma majority haven't. The ones that are like this leave a very indelible impression because you remember how they make you feel. And no one likes to have the Sunday scaries, being afraid to go into work on Monday. And no one does their best work. They're not innovative, they're not as responsible. They don't feel like they have as much loyalty to an organization when they're being controlled by fear.
Mm. And so, how did you? I mean, I know now you're probably well equipped to deal with it, and because you've written the book about it. But when you first experienced it, what did it feel like for you, and how did you deal with that situation?
Certainly. Well, I have a really strong sense of justice.
Hmm.
When I see things that are wrong or not okay, or people being mistreated, my immediate instinct is, oh, this isn't okay. If other people knew about this, they would make it stop. So
Hmm.
very early in my career, when I saw people doing illegal things or abusive things, I would tell someone. And I very quickly learned that that's a recipe for destroying your own career. Um, I had the ombud of one very large company tell me, you must not be seeing what you're thinking you're seeing. You know, shut up and take it, or else, you'll be punished. And um, I remember I saw a boss committing blackmail against another colleague, and I reported that because it was illegal. And my next review cycle said, you're not a team player. You need to learn how to work on a team. You know, you need to play nice and get in line, or you shouldn't be here. So I very quickly learned that that's not really the way to go.
Yeah. And so, having spoken up about it, and going back to what you say about, justice is something that is very important to you. And I do recognize it can be easier to stand up for other people, but when it comes to standing up for ourselves, it can be harder. So for you to stand up and voice your concerns, what effect did that have on you?
Well, at the time, I found it very discouraging.
Mm.
Um, growing up, I would tell relatives, "Hey, something's not right at home. This isn't right. Bad things are happening," and the answer was usually, "Not my problem. Don't talk to me. You should go away." And so to have that echoed in my professional career was immensely frustrating. I
Mhm.
think that young people, especially when they get negative feedback, it can really destroy some of the illusions they have about the world because people in college are told, work hard, you'll go out in the world, you'll have your dream job, you'll make your mark on the world. And the reality is that a lot of businesses are set up to be highly extractive. They treat their employees like clogs in a wheel. They resent the fact that they have any human aspects at all. If there are messes, if there are illegal things, their attitude is, don't tell me, I don't want to know. Um, and it was a really hard finding to realize that, not only where I was growing up was unjust, but a lot of the business world is unjust. And so I had to really get smart and start applying some of the lessons I had learned to develop a new set of strategies.
Mm. Yeah, because it can be quite daunting for someone who is experiencing this, and they may not be able to develop those strategies. And I do want to talk about how somebody can respond to that sort of a leader. But before we do you have any thoughts on what leads leaders to lead in that way?
Yes, I do. So I spent thousands of hours with leading trauma therapists studying why leaders are like this. Because I had to know, when you're a good person who does good things and people do things that seem so cruel and so out of line, you want it to make sense. And psychologically, fear-based leaders fall in what I call dark triad psychology, which is, a mix of Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and some other highly controlling traits. And the reason that people adopt these traits is because they themselves are motivated by fear. That's actually why I call them fear-based leaders, because when they're asleep or falling asleep at night, their subconscious is whispering to them, will I ever be enough? Will they
Mm,
ever like me? If they don't like me, will they at least fear me? And many of them have missed what I call kindergarten lessons. When they were growing up in their families, often their families were set up in very bullying type structures. And what happens is people like this from a young age learn that there's no such thing as equality. They're told you're either being stepped on or you're doing the stepping. And so when
mm,
they grow up and they achieve power, they want to make sure that they're always, the one with their boot on someone else's neck, because to them, the only alternative is for them to be down and out.
mm. So it's like it's a form of insecurity, really, isn't it? That from their early experiences where they, as you said, lived in that sort of an environment, then that's had an impact on how they view themselves and the world. So that's a form of insecurity, that lashing out. Um, and and so in terms of, so when you sort of did your research around this and speaking to therapists, and what sort of information did these therapists give you about the work that they did with their.
Definitely. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time reading different social scientists' theories about people like this,
Mhm.
from studying things from the lens of trauma psychology with people like Bessel van der Kolk, Pete Walker, Janina Fisher, Peter Levine. And the therapist that I spoke to about this type of person essentially told me these are very emotionally stunted people. Their body age does not match their maturity age. So they're not capable of the same level of nuance that most adults are. And essentially, what they told me is these people are really to be pitied. They're to be pitied because they don't know how to connect with others. They don't understand what it's like to be equal to someone and genuinely love them. Rather than love, they substitute control. And so they lead these very emotionally limited lives, where they tell themselves, I have money, I have power, I'm on top. But really, their existence is a pretty sad existence. They don't have a lot of friends. Their life is full of transactional relationships. I also have a degree in international relations, and I spent a lot of time studying what happens when people like this are in political philosophy. What happens when people like this are community leaders, church leaders, things like that. And
Mm.
you can see them really scattered throughout history. Wherever you kind of find people who are saying might makes right, you know that they're trying to quote unquote lead with fear. But I would argue that it's not really a form of leadership, right? It's more a control mechanism
Mm.
masked as leadership.
Yes, and that is what it is. It's control. They want the power. Um, uh, and I'm just wondering in terms of the gender balance, but I guess maybe that might be difficult to sort of quantify because historically there'd be more male leaders than women leaders. There's been more men leaders than women leaders. But when you were doing your research, did you come across any thing about the gender differences?
Yes, definitely. So you're right. There are more men in leadership roles. And so there are just, by law of averages, more male fear-based
Hmm.
leaders. However, society also gives a lot more permission for men to behave in this way. Men are more able to make statements, violent, let's crush our competitors, like, let's get on top, like, I wanted to destroy the competition. They can say things like that when a lot of women are held to different norms. And so I have absolutely run into female fear-based leaders, but they've been about 25% of my
Hmm.
experiences with them. In my experience, fear-based leaders who are women show up more in mean girl situations. They might be dominating a community group. They might be dominating a family. You hear about like our matriarch is such a dragon or something like
Hmm.
that. And so they're absolutely there, but they're a little bit less obvious. Often their worst behavior is very much behind closed doors.
Right, okay. Yeah, it's interesting how it shows up in women. And I've not experienced it personally with a woman, but I have heard um people talk about who are um leading in that way or controlling in that way. And and you mentioned that there's a surge in such leaders and even in areas that have not been seen before. What what's all that about, do you think?
Oh wow, it is a surge. It's almost like bell-bottom jeans coming back in, one day they're nowhere and the next day they're everywhere. Uh, I have had about 30 managers in my career, and when I started out, about 3 in 10 of the leaders I encountered were like this. And I was having very broad exposure to different industries and different markets because I was working as a consultant. So saw a lot of different clients as leaders, saw a lot of different consultants as leaders. But in the last 3 to 5 years, it has been closer to 7 in 10 leaders I've
Mm.
encountered. And I work with a lot of leaders, CEOs in my practice, venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, working in private equity and venture myself. And so this started to really concern me because, I was going to running group on Saturdays, and every person I talked to was struggling with the same things at work. And when I took a step back, I realized that media in the last 10 years has pushed us in this direction. Game of Thrones, House of Cards, Billions, Succession, all of these TV shows are almost idolizing fear-based leaders.
Mm.
But more than that, there is a new level of permissiveness where 10 years ago, a CEO would not be caught dead, saying, um, I don't care if my employees are happy. I don't care what they think. I'm just there to extract value from them. If they die at their desks, I'll just get more. But that's actually what we're seeing in Silicon Valley right now, where Folks like the leaders of Meta and Tesla and Microsoft are essentially saying, we have a new performance culture. We're going to cut the bottom 20% every year. If you don't like my ethos, I don't care. Get in line or get out.
Mm.
And what happens when you have major leaders behaving like that is people's ears perk up and they go, is this how I have to be? To have control over my company, do I need to be an asshole? And all the people who had tendencies to be drawn to power for not so great reasons go, hey, I don't have to pretend anymore. And so yeah, it's created really a perfect storm.
Mm. And I wonder what's behind all that, behind that surge. Is it the times that they're in? And um, they're yeah, I'm just trying to fathom why we are seeing that surge. After sort of recognize after sort of years of leadership doesn't help to nurture and develop. I wonder what's behind all of that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, when you think about it, I tend to think the best leaders are the ones that didn't want to be leaders in the first place. Um, and right now, most leaders are leaders because they have made a grab for power. And people who are grabby about power want the easy path. They want a high control path. They essentially want to put themselves on a pedestal and have everyone else be below them. And the fastest, easiest forcing mechanism to get people to bow down to you is to rule by fear. And that feeds the validation they need for their very deeply insecure egos. And so you just have all these people being drawn to power for the wrong reasons who then say, I'm all powerful. And in Silicon Valley, at least, we have philosophers like Curtis Yarvin who are very popular right now that essentially say, um, you are better than everyone else. If you have more wealth, if you have more money, you deserve to have more control over society. The rest of society should bow down to you. Let them be your peasants. Let them be your servants. You are like a feudal lord. If someone comes to work for you, you own them forever. And this idea of treating people like possessions, um, really like things is very appealing. It's really appealing for people who want to do bad things.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess social media and the fast-paced world that we live in now doesn't help. Where you get a lot of that people wanting to present a particular image online. Mm. And so, how can someone recognize uh, and respond to a fear-driven leader or the behaviors of a fear-driven leader?
Yeah, so you actually described that right when we started. When you feel like you have to walk on eggshells, you are around a fear-based leader. If you see someone who is leading with shame, belittling other people, manipulating people by taking away the things they care about, deliberately causing chaos, deliberately causing distress. You're around someone who's fear-based. However, a lot of people don't realize that you can actually thrive under fear-based leaders. You just have to figure out how to carve out a protected niche for yourself. It's kind of like saying, I'm in the middle of a blizzard. Yes, it's cold. Yes, I don't like the snow, but can I form a little igloo for myself and keep the people I care about in there with me? And we're still going to have a good life. And so that's the tools that my book teaches. So,
Mm.
first, it talks about how to build resilience and protect your own energy. If you're going to be applying new strategies against someone, you need to make sure that you're as well resourced as possible. So, making sure you know what fills your cup, whether that's gardening once a week or playing with your kids every day, or, whatever it is that really brings you joy. And then you can start learning how the fear-based leaders think. For example, they communicate with emotions, not logic. And if you reply to their emotional statements with logic, it will make them really angry. So if you understand how to actually read the meaning behind their statements, you can give them an adjusted reply that's kind of on their radio channel. You also have to start thinking about ways to essentially keep yourself as safe as possible. And you can do this first by being very mindful of what information you share with a fear-based leader. You can still be authentic around your team and the people that matter most to you, but when you're around someone that weaponizes information, you shouldn't say things like, "Oh, wow, I'm so excited to go to my daughter's piano recital this Saturday," because you can bet that that fear-based leader will use that information against you. They'll call you in on Saturday and make you work, etc. And so, you could think of it as we're in a new dance. Now you need to learn the steps. But if you learn the steps, you may not get stepped on.
Mm. Yeah, and what happens sometimes, well, what I've seen happen sometimes is that the impact that the leader has led the person to believe that it's them that is the issue, not the leader. And because of the sort of power dynamics and their position with the leader, they they it sort of chips away at them that they start to think that there's something wrong with them or they're not doing something right, rather than recognizing that it is the leader that is the issue, not them.
Yeah, this is especially hard for introverted women,
Mm,
because in my experience, introverted women are often deeply conscientious. They're highly attuned to the emotional environment around them. And so when someone comes in with what feels like the force of nature and it's directed negatively at you, it can feel so out of left field that you start questioning yourself.
mm,
And fear-based leaders will lie to you. They will say, "I am big and scary. You are powerless. You are nothing without me. Resistance is futile. You know, you wouldn't be able to survive on your own. Be grateful. Get in line." And all of that is a lie. They are actually not big and scary. They're actually really scared. And you're not powerless. You're very powerful. It's just about learning to recognize the leverage you have over them and then learning how to exercise it.
mm. Yeah, and how can they go about that?
Yeah, for sure. So my book has a toolkit that is meant to feel like I'm sitting across from you having a coffee, telling you how to deal with assholes at work.
Mhm,
Um, and it teaches a lot of different tactics, and some of them would be pretty easy for introverted women to apply. For example, one of them is leveraging your availability. One of the major ways to show a fear-based leader that you have power is by not being available.
mm,
You can say, "Oh, sorry, I was on a flight," or I didn't have cell service, or my phone broke, or whatever it is you want to say. But simply not being available for 24 hours on a weekend or, in an evening, really makes the fear-based leader spin out. And there are a lot of ways to assert your power like that. There are ways to negotiate with fear-based leaders. If you understand you're going to be negotiating with someone in bad faith, you can use what I call sacrifice initiatives, where you give them initiatives to let them cut so it makes them feel like they're winning, but you
mhm.
ultimately still get what you want, and so on.
Yes, and I guess it's sort of being able to have that awareness about what's going on and the dynamics that are at play there. And so for sort of middle managers, senior leaders in organizations that do have that kind of um hierarchical structure, or say it's the CEO that is the one that is the fear-based leader and it's driven downwards, how what can they do to protect their people?
Yeah, I tell people that. Learning strategies like this is effectively like getting an umbrella. Um, the fear-based leader can rain on you, but as long as you have an umbrella, it's okay. And often that means that you have to choose how you want to present to the fear-based leader. You can choose to be underestimated. You can choose to be seen as incompetent. You can choose to be seen as their ally. There are many different ways to play it, but you have to pick one and then run that strategy looking upwards. Maybe you're the fear-based leader's hype person. Maybe you say yes to everything they want to say, but then below you, you're actually running a team that gets strong results because you are caring and nurturing and thoughtful and good.
Mm,
As long as the fear-based leader feels like you're respecting them and are on their wavelength, they will often leave you alone, especially if you're getting the types of results that they want.
mm,
Um, is if you know what the fear-based leader is incentivized by, and then you can deliver to those incentives, that's highly protective to be able to continue running your own org.
yeah, and that sounds very much like a situation that a coaching client of mine is going through at the moment, and with their teams, um, they're very much a supportive coaching style of leadership, um, whereas with the person that they report into, it is totally different. And when they first started coaching, there were a lot of challenges and issues around how they dealt with this person. But now they've recognized, well, that person is that person. They can't change that person, but what they can do is put those boundaries in place and protect themselves, um, and look at how they relate to that person, and using some of the tactics that you've just described as well is helping them to have a better experience. Mm.
Yeah, definitely. You could think of when you're around a fear-based leader, you almost need to imagine that you're in a protected, safe bubble. Nothing they say can hurt you because they're just this emotionally stunted person that you pity, right? They can yell as much as they want, and it doesn't change who you are and what your values are
Mm.
and the types of behaviors that you're going to espouse on your team and your department with your people. Um, and I think that something that always comes to mind is this quote attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, which is, "No one can make you inferior without your consent." And that can be hard to resist around fear-based leaders because they're effectively screaming, "Put me on a pedestal above you. I'm better than you. Bow down." Uh, and so it's up to you to say, no, you're a person and I'm a person. We are equal in our humanity. I will treat you with the compassion and respect that I treat everyone, but
Mm.
you are not special, except to the extent that everyone is special, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so when someone is putting those boundaries in place and the leader oversteps those or tries to overstep those boundaries, I think what you described earlier about, say they're trying to contact you at an unreasonable time or something, and just not responding, and just telling them that you were unavailable. Um, but it is important to keep those boundaries and enforce those boundaries, isn't it? So that, because if you give in, then what's that saying? Give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Um,
They they definitely will.
mhm,
There's a chapter in my book called "If You Give a Mouse a Cookie," because there's a children's book where you give the mouse a cookie and then he wants a glass of milk and then eventually he wants your house. Uh, um, and fear-based leaders are like that. And so I tell people to practice being like the most inert thing on the landscape. Pretend that
mhm,
you are a gray rock. If you yell at a rock, if you kick a rock, it's still just a rock. It's not going to do anything. And if you can essentially be boring for the fear-based leader to metaphorically kick, they will move on to kicking someone or something else.
mhm. Right. And so where can people get your book?
Definitely. So it's available online wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indigo, all of these good places. The launch date is October 28th. So that's quite exciting. I'm really, really
Mm.
glad to get this out in the world. And every week I share insights about how to deal with fear-based leaders on LinkedIn and Instagram at Kate Unbreakable Lowry. You can also see what's coming up on my website, katelowry.com.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for sharing those details, and I will put the links how people can find you in the show notes. And so, is this your first book that you've
It
written?
is my first book. I
Yeah.
had no idea that I would be writing it this year. So it was as much a surprise to me as anyone. But
Mhm.
it's something where the cultural moment seems to really need it. And so I wanted to get it out in the world as fast as I could.
Yes, yes, and I think the way that the world is going, I think it is needed. Like I said, this is not a topic I've discussed on the podcast before, but it is a podcast. Sorry, it is a topic that I do believe needs to be had because you look at what's happening in the UK, you look at what's happening in the US and in the rest of Europe and other parts of the world, and there's just this. It sometimes feels like we're going 20 or 100 steps backwards in terms of how far we've come. It seems like we're going backwards and back to some of the behaviors which we never we stopped tolerating. um
It's profoundly disappointing.
mm,
And also can be very shocking. um, that norms are essentially going backwards. Um, and I think it's really important, though, that we meet the moment where it is, because we can be as mad about the changes in the world as we want, but at the end of the day, we're still in the world, and we
mhm.
have to figure out how to deal.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, we still have to live our lives, we still have to work, we still have to earn a living. So, some situations we cannot change. So it's how do we respond in those situations? How do we adapt in those situations without compromising ourselves and who we are and what we stand for? That um, Working within that system and doing what we can if we cannot change that system.
Yeah, I think that the people writing the rules right now have a lot of power. Um,
Mhm.
but my expertise is creative problem solving within hard constraints. And I always tell my coaching clients that when you feel stuck and there's no options in front of you, that's okay. We'll turn around behind you and draw some doors, draw some windows, create paths where you don't see paths.
Mhm.
Because even when you feel quite trapped, if you stretch out your arms, there's often more space around you than you think. If you have a little space, that means that you can exercise your agency and autonomy to manage the situation as best you can.
I think that is a great place to end our conversation. Thank
See?
you so much, Kate. It's been a pleasure to have you. Such an interesting topic. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, Carol. Thank you so much for having me, and best wishes to your whole audience for anyone dealing with leaders like this.
Mm. So thank you, listeners and viewers for watching and listening. And do go and check Kate out and buy her book when it's released on was it the 28th of October?
Yes, pre-orders are active now, and it's coming out in just a few weeks.
Right, okay, so just a few weeks you can go and pre-order it, so do get it. And for those of you who are leading in organizations where there is that fear-based hierarchical or leadership, or even if you are not a leader, or somebody who is experiencing that, then do get a copy of Kate's book because yeah, having those strategies on how to deal with that will be beneficial for you or for those people that you know. And if you're looking to increase your confidence and influence, if you haven't completed the free assessment on my website. Go to aboundingsolutions.com. Under the free resources, there's an assessment that you can fill out that will give you ideas about areas that you can focus on to increase your confidence, influence, and impact. And so until the next time, bye.